All right. Welcome, guys. How many of you, this is your first night for this? You weren't here last month. Raise your hand. Awesome. Great. So, what you'll find is in the book, it's for you to take with you to have as a resource. Our goal is to provide you information to help you live the virtue of chastity. And we know that it's not easy, right? In today's modern world, it's not easy. And so, it's worth taking some time to look at how we can do this. Last time we talked about how the first way that we experience the struggle in the living chastely is with temptations. Temptations come from outside us through our senses. We see something, we hear something. Though that's what we focused on last time. And so, what we do with temptations is we want to manage them. Think of them as the near occasions of sin that we look to make sure that we're avoiding those. And if we come across them, we step away from them. Tonight, we're going to look at the other way we experience those challenges against chastity, and that's with urges or the cravings. So maybe we're doing a good job of avoiding a near occasion of sin, but you know what? For some reason, I still crave to do what I'm not supposed to do. All right. And we're going to basically probably come across those in two ways. One is we're just conditioned to engage in a habit or an activity. The other is we might have like a tendency to turn towards it for coping reasons. And so we'll look at both of those. Now, let's hop into the book here. And I want to start on page 21. So part of the reason that things become habitual for us is because of actually the way that God made us. And when we learn to cooperate with that and work within that, it actually will help us to live free and actually be the best that we can be. So in the top right, you see that little picture of the brain. And what that represents is how habits are created. So I'm going to give you an example. 20 years or so ago, when the Culver's first came to the area, I went and had a cookie dough concrete mixer for the first time. And I was like, that is amazing. All right. And my brain was flooded with a chemical called dopamine. And I loved it. That chemical helped me to associate that cookie dough concrete mixer with something really good, really pleasurable. Now, an interesting thing happened. The next time I'm driving down the road and I see a Culver's sign, my brain instinctively knew that there's something good at that place called Culver's. And my brain started to remember having that concrete mixer. And it slowly started to go through this process of, ooh, maybe I could stop and get another concrete mixer. Ooh, that would be really good. Oh, that was awesome the last time I had that. And all of a sudden, the dopamine that I experienced the first time I had one began to flood my brain again. And it's really interesting. So I pull over, I stop, I get my concrete mixer. It's interesting. The second time we're in pursuit of something, the dopamine actually releases on the way to getting it. We don't actually experience as much the second time we eat the concrete mixer. Okay. So now let's apply that to video games. All right. How many of you what's someone's favorite video games? What's your favorite? Legends of what?
Of Zelda, bro.
Of Zelda Breath of the Wild. All right. What's another one? Oh, your classic. Yeah, the OG. All right. One more? Anyone else favorite video game? All right. So we can probably all though relate to a time that we got so into a video game that all of a sudden like 2 hours goes by and it felt like nothing, right? Part of what that is the dopamine in our brain is getting us fixated and focused on something. All right. That's how God made our brains. It's good for us. Same thing can happen when we're scrolling social media, right? My D group last week, we were talking before Lent, and we were talking about how easy it is just to end up on YouTube Shorts and just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And all of a sudden a half hour, an hour goes by, right? And so part of what we need to do when it comes to dopamine is we need to recognize that first of all, okay? Because what we can do with dopamine is fall into a habit called buffering. And on the bottom of page 21, you see the little picture of the guy there. And the little guy in the picture, he's got three uncomfortable emotions that he's facing: pain, boredom, and discomfort. And so what does he do? His brain naturally says, you know what? I want to do something to feel better. I want to do something so I don't have to feel pain, boredom, and discomfort. And what happens is that dopamine that comes from video games, cookie dough concrete mixers, scrolling YouTube, looking at pornography, those are things that release dopamine that help us forget whatever it is that's making us feel uncomfortable. And so it buffers us from that. It's like that little wall in the middle picture there. But then what happens a lot of times with all of those different types of dopamine hits is many times afterwards, we're left feeling even worse. If I keep eating concrete mixers all day, I'm going to feel bad because eventually I'm going to have to buy bigger clothes, right? I'm not going to be in as good a shape. And I know that from experience, right? I've done that. So part of what we want to do is learn to recognize that why it is that we buffer. And a lot of times, if you look on page 23, the second question there is a lot of times there's uncomfortable emotions that we want to avoid feeling. And there's a really good acronym to remember those by called BLASTED: bored, lonely, angry, anxious, stressed, tired, and depressed. And stop and think about that. Do you like to feel bored? No, no one likes to feel bored, right? So what do you naturally do when you feel bored? You try to find something to make yourself feel better, right? If you're lonely, what do? Okay. Now the difference here is this, is it's a negative buffering activity when, in that definition underneath there, buffering is using a comforting behavior to avoid feeling pain, boredom, or uncomfortable emotions, even though the behavior will ultimately have a long-term negative effect. Okay? There's nothing wrong with having a cookie dough concrete mixer every once in a while, right? But if I do that every time that I feel bad, I'm running the risk of turning to negative things whenever I feel bad, and I never learn constructive ways to deal with that. And so that's part of what we want to look at tonight. So if we go to the next page, we talked about this idea that the blasted emotions, the boredom, the loneliness, the anger, the anxiousness, etc., those things can make us want to turn to buffering. Okay. Part of what we want to learn as we grow up and mature is we want to begin to understand the relationship between our emotions, our feelings, and how we act. Okay. And so when I was young, when I was your age, I really wouldn't have known even how to describe an emotion. And yet it's something that's so natural to us. So think of on the top of page 24, there's 3 bullet points where it says, she made me feel so mad I wanted to blow my top. What emotion is that person feeling when he wants to blow his top? Anger. Absolutely. We intrinsically know this. I got choked up at my dad's funeral. What emotion is that when I get choked up? Sadness. Yeah, we instinctively kind of relate this, but what I want to do in order to help us make sure that we're dealing with negative emotions in a constructive way is give you a little bit of education around that. So on page 25, there's 2 pictures there. And part of what those pictures are trying to tell us is that we actually feel emotions in our body. So look at the picture of the guy that's anger, the red and the yellow. What that is some scientists actually interviewed people, and they said, take a look at, or think about a time that you were angry, and where did you feel that in your body? And they put, that's called a heat map. The red is like highly agitated. There's chemicals flowing to that part of the body that make you feel like you got to move, you got to do something. And the yellow is the most intense. Okay. And stop and think about when last time you were angry about something. Did you want to hit something? Did you want to leave? Did you want to go yell at someone? Right? That's part of why that's what emotions are designed to do, is they're designed to make us choose an action. Okay. Now, fortunately, we have the freedom to choose what those actions can be. Okay. And that's important for us to understand that difference. Let's compare now the emotion of sadness. Okay. What we see with the guy that has the blue and the legs and the arms, when we get sad, the chemicals leave our body because we know that we're vulnerable. All right. No one likes to be sad. I remember a couple times that, when my dad passed away a few years ago, I was sad. I just had no energy. I just wanted to kind of just sit. Well, what is that? That's kind of God's way of creating us to make us know, when something like that happens, we need to take some time to reflect on it, to just let it be. And so we kind of go to a place and just kind of hunker down. Nowadays, we probably sit in Netflix all day or something like that, right? But that's part of what that emotion is designed to be. But I will tell you this, when I was young, no one ever explained that to me. And so I developed a bunch of really bad buffering habits that I would turn to things to make myself feel better because I didn't have anyone explain to me that, Jeremy, yeah, when something bad happens, it's normal to feel sad. And just to be comfortable with that in my body. Now, how do we do that? Well, one of the ways that we can begin to get comfortable with emotions is on page 28. I'll let you flip to there. There's a process called emotional regulation. Okay. And I think a good way to compare it is like this. In my house, we turn down our heat at night. Okay. Because we're all hunkered down in our blankets and everything. And so we turn the heat down and we sleep. And then when we wake up in the morning, we turn it up a few degrees so that the house warms up because now we're out and we're moving around. Okay. By turning up the heat or turning down the heat, we're regulating the temperature in our house. Okay. We want to learn the ability to do something very similar with our emotions, that we can learn to recognize what we're feeling and then find ways that are constructive instead of destructive or sinful in order to help ourselves get our emotions to a place that we're comfortable. All right. And I want to give you 3 kind of steps that work together. The first is on page 28, right in the middle of the page, it has the word awareness. Okay. So the first step is awareness. The second is understanding. And then the third will be choosing an action. So let's talk about emotional awareness. And I'm going to flip back a page to that big colorful wheel on page 26. And as you look in the center of that wheel, you'll see 7 words. Those are 7 kind of core emotions: angry, sad, fearful, happy. Those are probably emotions you can relate to. And it's important that this first step of learning to emotionally regulate is just giving ourselves permission and slowing down long enough to recognize that something is bothering us or what we're feeling. Because the second step, understanding that, and once I'm aware, I can start to get curious. I can start to ask questions. Why am I feeling this? It's like, well, I'm angry. And why am I angry? Well, maybe I'm frustrated. That'd be that second level. If you look angry in that kind of pinkish level there, one of the words is frustrated. Well, maybe I'm frustrated at school because I'm doing a group project and I feel like I'm the only one that's taking it serious, right? Would that frustrate you? And what is frustrating about that? Well, maybe I feel, what would be the word? Infuriated, maybe. Betrayed might be one. Okay. Part of what happens is when we get curious about our emotions and what are we really feeling and what's driving it, is we can actually respond to them better. Okay. Because think about a time, maybe you were angry and it was like all you knew to do was just be angry. And what do? It was difficult to do anything constructive with it because all I could feel was the anger. What we find is there's a phrase called name it to tame it. The better we can name and identify the emotion, the easier it is to actually do something constructive with it. And then finally, so awareness, understanding. The last one then on page 30, let you flip to that. is I have a little acronym that I like to use for the actions and responses we can choose. Constructive, it's called CAP. It's constructive choices instead of destructive ones, accepting emotions when appropriate, and processing uncomfortable ones. So when we do feel bad, it's natural to want to do something to feel better. And it's good just to slow down long enough to say those 3 questions under constructive versus destructive. Is the action morally right, wrong, or neutral? If it's morally right and neutral, then you know what? It may be something that's okay to do. Is it good for us, for me and the people impacted by it? And what are the long-term impacts? Again, if the only way I know how to deal with uncomfortable emotions is to eat concrete mixers, that's not good for me in the long term, right? I need to learn some other ways to do that. The second thing is sometimes it's appropriate to accept the emotions and just let it be. Again, I mentioned a few years ago, my dad passed away. And as you can imagine, I love my dad. And I felt bad. I mean, you go through this process. It was about a week leading up from the time he had a very severe stroke to the time he died. We knew his death was coming. He died, and then you go through the whole process of planning the funeral and the wake and the funeral. And it was really sad. It's okay to feel sad at times. I didn't need to do something to feel better. It was just okay. And those are times to be around family, to be around friends, and let them help us carry the burden so that we can accept those and be with those. And then the third one is learning to process uncomfortable emotions. And I want to share with you. So on the top of page 31, I introduced for the first time a process called stop, drop, and breathe. And again, we experience emotions in our body. And so one of the things we can do is we can just stop what we're doing or just what we're focused on and just take a few deep breaths. And what happens, I mentioned last time, I did the little, if this is your brain, okay, the main part of the brain, then your brain stem, there's this little part here underneath it that's called the limbic system, or I call it the lower brain. And what happens is that lower brain responds 20 times faster than the higher brain, the prefrontal cortex. And sometimes we just need to slow down, take a couple deep breaths, and let our higher brain catch up with with those emotions. And what that does is then lets us make a better decision. Okay, so I stop, I drop into my body, what am I feeling? Okay. And then if you want to kind of get an idea what that feels like, that's where those colored heat maps of the emotions are helpful. And then just once I recognize what I'm feeling, I just kind of breathe and just allow myself to feel it. Those chemicals that I talked about, how those colors go to the different parts of our bodies, those will actually last if we don't resist them. They actually exist for only about 60 to 90 seconds. And if we just kind of acknowledge what they're trying to tell us, I'm angry about something, I'm sad, I'm happy, they'll actually kind of pass on their own after about a minute and a half. Okay. And so that processing that and just becoming aware of that. Now, let's put this all together into processing urges. And that will be on the next page. So again, two ways that urges most often are going to come to us. One, because they're a habit. We're just conditioned because of the dopamine, or because we use an activity to avoid a negative feeling. Okay. Let's talk about the first one. On the top of page 32, how many of you have heard the story of Pavlov's dogs? Raise your hand if you've heard. Okay, so this is probably something talked about in science class. So there was a Russian scientist in the early 1900s, and he was studying just kind of behavioral type stuff. And what he did is he had some dogs in his laboratory. And what he would do is he would ring a bell and then bring them food. And he did that over and over again after a number of days. And eventually what happened is he could ring the bell, but not have food. And they had associated the bell with the food coming. And so they would start salivating, even though there wasn't food. It wasn't the food that triggered the expectation of the food and the way the body would take it. It was the bell. And so he conditioned them. And that same thing can happen with us. You might be experiencing that right now with Lent, okay? Let's say you gave up sweets for Lent. And hypothetically, maybe every afternoon, it's just your habit when you get home from school, you have a candy bar or something sweet, right? And Wednesday comes and it's your first time, okay, I'm not going to have a candy bar or a cookie or whatever it is when I get home from school. But what does your body want? Your body wants the candy bar, right? And so what do? Well, what do you say? Oh, okay, all right. So he failed Lent on the first day. Oh, okay. All right. He didn't give up. All right. What'd you give up? Culver's. Hey, all right. Yeah. That's you. Me too. So what do you do if you gave up Culver's or candy and it's Wednesday? It's Ash Wednesday. Well, you probably do something like this. You kind of just talk yourself through it. It's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm used to eating something sweet when I get home from school. I'm giving up for Lent. This is only 6 weeks, 6.5 weeks. It'll be okay. And then maybe you replace it with something else that's positive, right? So maybe you take a little time for prayer. You go out, you get a walk in or do something like that, right? So that's part of the first way we'll experience an urge is we're just conditioned to do something. And that's why fasting during Lent is such a good spiritual practice, is it allows us to get in the habit or learn the process of giving something up. Now, what's interesting with Pavlov's dogs is the good news is you won't always have that behavioral pattern that you expected. Because what Pavlov did is he ended up continuing the process and he would ring the bell, but not bring them food. And at first they were confused, naturally, right? Okay. But then he would keep doing it, ring the bell, no food, ring the bell, no food. And eventually their reaction, their response of salivating diminished and totally went away. And so the same thing can happen for us. If we have a habit that we're trying to get out of, might be a sexual sin, it might be just something that, we spend too much time watching YouTube videos. Over time, if we engage that higher brain and just kind of say, you know what, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be better for not doing this. Over time, that urge will decrease. Now let's look at the second way that we experience urges. Okay. And that's because we turn to them because they're our emotional coping mechanism. Okay. With this, we want to not only use the stop, drop, and breathe method to process the emotions, but it's a good way to process the urges too. Okay. And you know what? I'm going to share an example with you. And my intent to share this with you is that you will always have temptations and you will always have urges throughout life, okay? We talked about this last time. To experience a temptation is not itself a sin. To indulge it, to go back to it, to engage in the temptation, when we act on it, that's when it becomes a sin, okay? But we will always do that. And so I'm going to share this example to help you understand that you can process these things and respond to them. And it was just this morning at Mass, okay? So we were sitting kind of on the side, and there was a young gal, probably in her mid-20s, very attractive. As I looked up from the side and looked over at the pews, I'm like, my goodness, that woman is really attractive, okay? And it was like, I caught myself, right? I was like, oh, okay, first level, I'm aware that, you know what, I'm kind of tempted to kind of keep looking at her. All right, so I just thought, again, it's near occasion of sin. It's like, okay, Lord, just bless her. I recognize that this is going on. I'm not going to look at her. So I manage the temptation. But then I recognized something deeper there, that, you know what, I wanted to look at her. And it's interesting. So this urge, why is this? And so I did this process, that awareness, understanding, and then choosing what to do. And I recognize, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm sick. I don't normally have this deep radio voice. Where's the laughter? Okay, thank you. All right. Oh, okay. All right. I don't normally have this deep radio voice, and I'm just not feeling well. I got home from church, I slept for 4 hours. That's how bad I'm feeling. And I realized, you know what? There was something that I was finding, just the element of seeing the beauty, of the attractiveness. There was something in me that was drawn to that for comfort. And so then I looked in my heart and I said, what is that? And I said, Lord, I'm tired. I'm not feeling well. And it was just, Lord, I recognize this, Lord. I don't want to let my mind and my heart use this woman. So Lord, I'm just going to open myself up to you. Lord, help me. Just, I look to you to help me with this. Okay. And so again, did I sin? No, because I recognized it. And first I managed to stop it. And then two, I recognized the urge and I said, okay, I don't want to indulge that, but what is really going on? And then I turn and I invite God into it. I'm not engaging in sin. I'm finding a constructive way to solve the real problem, that I'm tired, that I'm drained, that it's like, you know what, I want to do something to feel better. Does that make sense? And so I offer that as an example, and just a little peace of mind if you ever feel like, oh, the temptation's ever going to go away. I remember a priest one time saying that, yeah, maybe 5 minutes after you're dead, the temptations go away. Okay. That's just how it is, right? We're men, we're attracted to the beauty of women. And so again, that stop, drop, and breathe, I encourage you just to get curious. That's what I did this morning when I was at church. I said, what is really going on here? Oh, I'm tired. I'm just looking for something that will make me feel better in the moment. Right. And so what I did then is I needed to find something that was a constructive way to get that comfort, that feeling better, and not one that was destructive, that was either bad for me or ended up leading me into lust for another woman. And then finally, I won't go into tonight because I think once you get kind of out of high school and stuff, I think the lesson 5 will be good. And if you ever want to talk through it, feel free to reach out to me. But some emotions are difficult because they get complex. Maybe we something bad happens and it's like, oh, what do I do with it? Lesson 5 is there. Feel free to read it. If you ever want to reach out, if you ever want to talk, I'm more than happy to.